Hello, everyone. Before we start, hit like and subscribe and drop a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, the algorithm keeps bringing you stories like these. Tonight, 7 true horror stories from Alaska. Not the postcard version on cruise brochures and tourist t-shirts, but the one people live with when the tourists go home. The long dark when the sun barely rises. The ice roads at 3 a.m. The boats in the Bering Sea and the villages you can only reach by plane. These are first-person stories from people who thought they understood isolation until it turned on them. A dispatcher in Anchorage who took a call from a stranded driver on a road that was supposed to be closed and realized the caller could see her better than she could see him. A bush nurse in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta whose medevac flights stopped being about patients and started revolving around one particular pilot. A housekeeper at a wilderness lodge near Denali who found cameras where there should have been smoke detectors. A seafood processor in Bristol Bay whose foreman controlled not just her hours and her pay, but whether she got off the boat at all. A worker on the Dalton Highway whose safety officer seemed more interested in keeping her alone than keeping her safe. A state ferry crew member in southeast Alaska who realized one passenger never seemed to get off and always knew which cabin she was sleeping in. And a guide scheduler in Talkeetna who started getting satellite messages from a lost hiker that matched what she was wearing, not what she'd posted. Anchorage, the YK Delta, Denali, Bristol Bay, the Dalton, the Inside Passage, Talkeetna, 7 towns, 7 survivors. Let's get into it. Story 1. Story 1, Anchorage, Alaska. Graveyard shift dispatcher, Anchorage 911 Center. If you've ever called 911 anywhere in the Anchorage Bowl between midnight and 8, there's a chance you've talked to me. Or someone like me, headset on, 3 monitors glowing, coffee gone cold next to the mouse. You probably picture chaos. Phones ringing off the hook. People screaming. Sometimes it is like that. Friday nights. First snow. Breakup season when people finally snap after months of dark. But most nights it's stretches of boredom, broken by spikes of pure adrenaline. You're alone in a room with a handful of other people, and the whole city is just blinking dots on your screen that might go red. I'd been doing it long enough to get used to the rhythm. The fights outside bars on 4th Avenue. The welfare checks in Spenard. Moose in traffic on the Seward and the Glen. The drunk guy trying to break into the wrong condo in South Anchorage because the buildings all look the same in the snow. That's what you train for. What you don't train for is a caller who knows more about you than you know about him, and makes that the point. It was late January. The kind of cold Anchorage gets when the sky is perfectly clear. and the air feels like broken glass in your lungs. Night comes early then, you go into work at 6, and the sun is already gone. I'd drawn the overnight shift in the downtown center. 3 of us in the room, 1 supervisor in the glass office, the endless hum of the HVAC, and the soft beeps of CAD computer, aided dispatch updates. We made it through bar close without too much drama. A couple fights, 1 DUI, a guy who slipped on the ice outside a 7-Eleven and thought he'd broken his hip. Normal. Around 3:17 a.m. my line lit up. The Ani Ali automatic number and location populated. Wireless phone. Mile marker 118 on the Glen Highway. North of town, past Talkeetna. That stretch is dark even on good days. No streetlights. Mountains on one side, water on the other. 911. What is the address of your emergency? I launched into the script. Male voice. Calm, too calm. I'm on the Glen, he said. Hit some ice. I'm in the ditch. Standard so far. People misjudge black ice up there all the time. Okay. Are you injured? No. Truck's stuck pretty good, though. He gave a small chuckle that didn't touch his tone. Figured I'd call you before I froze to death. I pulled up the map. Mile 118. There shouldn't have been anyone there. That stretch had been closed for avalanche mitigation since late afternoon. State troopers had the barricades up at the last on-ramp. I'd seen the closure come over CAD at the beginning of my shift. Sir, can you see any road closure signs? I asked. Any lights? Other vehicles? He hesitated, just long enough that I noticed. Road S empty, he said. Haven't seen another set of headlights. In what time is it? I glanced at the clock on my screen. 3:18. Yeah, in hours. Sometimes people don't realize what they're telling you. They think they're just making conversation, a little comment about how quiet it is, how alone they feel. My brain is always running in the background. Time of day, weather, who's on duty, how long it'll take to get anyone there. I flagged the call for troopers, sent a unit from Palmer, started the timer in my head. 20 minutes minimum if the roads were good. What's your name, sir? He gave it. I typed it in. No warrants, no flags, just another name in a system full of them. Okay, I've got troopers headed your way. Stay in your vehicle if you can. Do you have fuel? A blanket? He snorted softly. You sound like my ex, he said, always telling me to be prepared. Sir, I need you to stay warm until help arrives. I softened my voice a little. People in shock respond better to calm. Any pain at all. Airbags deploy. No injuries, just my pride. He paused. You're the one with the braid, right? My fingers froze on the keyboard. I'm sorry. Dark hair, braid over your left shoulder. little silver ring in it. His tone was conversational, almost amused. "You always do it like that on nights, don't you? Braid it so it doesn't get stuck in the headset. There's a moment when adrenaline hits that feels like being dropped in ice water. Your hearing sharpens. Your vision tunnels. Some part of you wants to pretend you misheard. Another part knows you didn't. I didn't have a mirror at my station. Didn't need one. I knew what I looked like: sweatshirt, headset, hair in the same braid I'd been doing since high school. I also knew there were exactly 3 people in the room who could see me. 2 coworkers, 1 supervisor. All of them behind me, not in front. The windows in the dispatch center were tinted from the outside. During graveyard, they looked black, reflecting the consoles like a mirror. "Sir, how do you know what I look like?" I asked. I kept my tone as flat as I could. There was a soft, crackling sound on his end. I realized I'd been hearing it the whole time. A 2-way radio turned down low. "Lot of cameras in that building," he said after a beat. "You forget you're on them after a while. You start acting like they're just part of the walls." My heart started thudding in my ears. I swiveled in my chair just enough to see the dark glass of the supervisor's office, the double doors, the security camera dome in the corner of the ceiling. The live dispatch feed looped to a monitor on the wall for training, for audits. I'd stopped noticing it weeks into the job. Everyone did. If you're watching our internal camera system, that's a serious crime, I said, hearing the script come out of my mouth, even as my hands shook. "How are you accessing it?" He chuckled. "Relax," he said. "You're not the one in trouble. At least, not yet." I flagged my supervisor in CAD Priority Internal. "See me, active call," I typed, tagging my console number. She stood up in her office, brow furrowing, and stepped out. "Sir, I need you to focus on your location so we can get you help," I said, even though I already had the coordinates. "Can you see any landmarks? Guardrails? River on one side?" "You're good at this," he said. "Stay on script. Keep the caller calm. Don't let them know you're scared." His voice dropped like he was sharing a secret. "But your hands give you away. You tap your pen when you're nervous. Little rhythm on the desk. You've been doing it since I called." I glanced down. My right hand was, in fact, tapping my pen against the notepad beside the keyboard. An old habit my mom used to tease me about. I hadn't even realized. My supervisor reached my station and put a hand on the back of my chair. I hit mute and whispered, "He's describing me. Says he can see me." Her eyes flicked to the nearest camera dome, then to the wall monitor showing a 4-panel split of the room. Nothing unusual, just us, under fluorescent lights. "Ask him what else he sees," she mouthed. "Make him be specific." I unmuted. "Sir, how many people do you see?" I asked. "Which console am I at?" "Two others on your side," he replied easily. "Supervisor behind you to the right. Guy in the corner picking at his ear. You should tell him to stop. It's gross." The guy in the corner, Ethan, snatched his hand away from his ear like he'd been burned. "This line is recorded," I said. "If you're accessing law enforcement cameras, that's evidence. I need you to tell me where you are so we can resolve this safely." He sighed. "Always with the help," he said. "You don't remember my voice, do you?" I ran through years of calls in my head. Screaming mothers, drunk men slurring insults, calm voices reporting burglaries, fires, moose in the backyard. They blur together after a while. You remember the worst ones, the rest fade. "Should I asked carefully. "We talked during the earthquake," he said. "The big one. When the shelves came down in that grocery on Benson and you were under the desk with the headset on, trying not to cry." My throat closed. November 30, 2018. 7/1. The day the world shook and every phone in Anchorage lit up at once. I'd been 6 months into the job. New, shaky. I'd taken a call from a man trapped under collapsed shelving. Kept him on the line until fire got there, talking about anything but the way the building creaked. "You told me to listen to your voice," he said softly. "Said as long as I could hear you, I wasn't alone." I remembered the call now. Not his exact voice. The way he'd repeated my name when I gave it. The way he'd said he liked having something solid to hold on to. "You said you were at Cars on Benson," I said. "Sealing tiles on the floor." He laughed, short and sharp. "You remember," he said. "See, we have history." Tech from downstairs appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, badge swinging. My supervisor waved him toward the rack room. "Why are you calling tonight?" I asked. "Wanted to see if you'd recognize me," he said. "Wanted to see if you'd sound the same in the dark as you did in the daylight. Wanted to see if you'd notice when someone was watching you for once. For once, you think we don't know you," he continued. "We call, you pick up, you hear the worst 10 minutes of our lives, and then you hang up and go back to your coffee. But you don't stop existing for us. We still hear your voice in our heads. We still wonder where you go when you hang up, what you look like when you laugh, who you go home to." My skin crawled. Somewhere out there, a man who'd once been a dot on my screen had decided to make a project out of me. "Where are you?" I asked. He hummed. "Closer than you think," he said lightly. "Glen's pretty from up here. Lights of the city, little river of cars. You never go out on the balcony, though. You should. Fresh air's good for you." I froze. Balcony. Our dispatch center is on the 4th floor of a municipal building downtown. There's a narrow maintenance balcony outside the windows, accessed from a locked door at the end of the hall. I'd stood there once during a fire drill. The view was exactly what he was describing. I yanked off my headset. He's either above the glen or outside our building, I told my supervisor. He just mentioned the balcony. Security officers sprinted toward the back hallway. Tech killed the live camera feed. The wall monitor went black. I put the headset back on. Troopers are almost to your location, I said, defaulting to script even though the hair on my neck said he wasn't on the highway at all. Can you see their lights? He chuckled. You're not listening, he said. You are never listening. That's okay. I've been listening enough for both of us. The line went dead. We pinged his phone. The last tower hit showed an area north of town near Bluff Road, above the glen. Troopers found fresh tracks in the snow leading from a turnout to an overlook. No vehicle, no person, just an extinguished cigarette and an impression in the snow where someone had sat for a long time, looking down at the city. Security cleared the maintenance balcony. The door at the end of the hall was still locked. No footprints on the dusting of snow. No sign anyone had been there. Tech did a full audit of our system. Someone had been accessing the dispatch feed remotely for months, from a rotating set of IP addresses routed through VPNs. No one on internal staff. No obvious compromise. They locked it down, changed credentials, added two-factor. We still don't know exactly how he got in, or when he started watching. The number he called from that night was a prepaid burner bought at a convenience store off Muldoon. The cameras had been down for maintenance that week. We never found him. I still work graveyards. I'm good at it. But I wear my hair in a bun now. I ask them to move my console so my back isn't to the window. I don't tap my pen anymore. And sometimes, at 3 in the morning when the phones are quiet and the snow makes the whole city glow, I look up at the black glass and imagine someone on a hill above the glen, headset on, listening to me listening to them. If you ever talk to a dispatcher and think about them later, fine. We're human. But if your curiosity curdles into obsession, if you find yourself learning their rhythms, their posture, the way they tap their pen, you've crossed a line. We are not characters in your story. We are people doing a job. If someone ever makes you feel like you're the one under surveillance, even when you're the one supposed to be watching, tell someone. Lock it down. Don't assume a screen is a wall. Sometimes it's a window. Out in the villages off the road system, there aren't even windows, just runway lights cutting through the dark. And sometimes the person who controls those lights decides they like knowing you can't leave without them. Story 2. Story 2, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, Alaska. I'm a nurse. Travel now, lower 48. But for 3 years I worked in a tiny village on the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, one of those places you can't drive to. No roads in, no roads out. Just a gravel airstrip, a health clinic, a school, a store, a church, and miles of tundra and river in every direction. If you've never been to western Alaska in winter, it's hard to explain how big the sky feels, how flat everything is, how sound carries for miles, snow machines, dog teams, far-off planes, how much you depend on whoever's flying those planes when you need something that isn't in the village. Groceries, mail, medicine, medevacs. That dependence is what made what happened possible. The first time I met Eli, he was just the Bethel pilot. That's how everyone said it, Bethel pilots inbound. We knew the bush guys more by their hubs than their names. Bethel, Aniak, St. Mary S. They flew Cessnas and caravans loaded with everything from diapers to diesel additives. Eli flew for one of the bigger outfits, medevacs, mail, charter. Tall, younger than the other pilots. With that easy confidence you get from landing on short gravel strips in crosswinds that would make most people throw up. First impressions: competent, talkative, a little too aware that I was the only non-local woman in a 200-mile radius who wasn't a teacher or a missionary. I clocked it. I didn't think much of it. Every outsider in the village stood out. You just learned to carry yourself with respect and keep your head down. Our clinic was a 2-room building with a tiny pharmacy and a VHF radio in the corner that crackled with Bethel Center when planes were inbound. I worked with 2 community health aides, local women who knew everyone's family tree and every medical history by heart. We split call. If someone had chest pain at 3 a.m. or a kid broke an arm on the river, we got them stable and called for a plane. The first medevac Eli flew for us was straightforward. Middle-aged man, probable MI, needed to get to Bethel and then Anchorage. Weather marginal, ceiling low, but flyable. Eli put that caravan down on our icy strip like it was nothing. He helped us load the patient, cracked a joke about how village coffee was better than hotel coffee, asked how long I'd been out there. Normal small talk. He called me nurse instead of my name. I preferred it that way. Over the next 6 months, he was the one who answered our radio calls more often than not. I started to hear a pattern. If I was the one on the radio, he'd respond faster. If one of the health aides called, sometimes another pilot would end up taking it. At first, I chalked it up to schedules. Who was on duty? Who was rested? Bush flying, a brutal rotation. You take the runs you can. Then little things started to pile up. He started calling the clinic on the sat phone when he was en route for regular mail runs, not just medevacs. "Just checking if you guys need anything from town," he'd say. "Pharmacy supplies, coffee, whatever." It sounded thoughtful. The health aides loved it. Getting anything out, there was a production. But he always asked to talk to me, even when they said they had it handled. He began timing his arrivals for when I was on shift. We didn't have a formal schedule posted anywhere, a whiteboard in the back. That's it. But he always seemed to know. "I like when you're there," he said once over the radio, laughing it off. "You're organized. Makes my life easier." At the time, I convinced myself he was just being friendly. Pilots and clinic staff have to work together. We were all stuck out there together. Then I started getting texts. My cell didn't have normal service in the village, only spotty Wi-Fi when the satellite internet decided to work. But the clinic had a sat phone, and my number was on the file at the Bethel office. Technically, he could have gotten it from legitimate paperwork. The first text came on a clear February night when the aurora was out, so bright the snow glowed green. I was lying on my bunk in the tiny house the tribe had given me to live in, scrolling through cached emails when my phone buzzed. Unknown Alaska number. "Lights are crazy tonight. You seeing this?" I figured it was one of the health aides. I typed back, "Yeah, out over the river." "Insane. I bet you get a better view from your place," came the reply. "House by the fuel tanks, right." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told Eli where I lived. In a village that size, everyone technically knows where everyone lives. But hearing it spelled out by someone who didn't live there felt different. Exposed. "Who is this?" I asked. "Eli," came the reply. "Bethel pilot." I didn't answer. He sent another. "Don't worry, not stalking you, lol. Just flew over. Recognized the layout. You guys always leave the porch light on." I turned off the porch light. The next few weeks, he kept texting. Not constantly. Just enough that I couldn't forget he had my number. Weather reports. "Heard you guys got hammered with snow." "Flight updates. Should be in around 10. Want me to bring you anything from town?" Comments that blurred the line between professional and something else. "Bet you get lonely out there. Surprised you haven't gone crazy yet." I tried to set boundaries. Short answers, no emojis, kept everything clinical. "Thanks, patient stable. We'll have chart ready." He didn't push exactly. He just didn't stop. Then came the night he tied a medevac to whether I personally showed up on the runway. It was late March, warm by village standards, maybe 10 above. An elder came in with signs of a stroke. Face drooping, slurred speech, one arm weak. Classic. We gave oxygen, did what we could, and I called Bethel on the radio. "Bethel Center. This is village name clinic. requesting medevac, probable CVA, patient age 72. Stable, but needs CT and TPA window closing. Static, then Eli's voice. I knew it instantly. Copy that, village clinic, he said. What's your visibility? We went through the usual. Ceiling, wind, runway condition. All within his company's minima. We'll be there in 40, he said. Hey, is this Emma? I hadn't given my name yet. I hadn't said a word besides the script. Yes, I said cautiously. Good, he said. You're thorough. I like that. I ignored it, signed off, focused on the patient. Half an hour later, my health aide partner burst into the exam room with the radio still in her hand, eyes wide. He says he won't land unless you're the one on the strip, she said. What? She held up the radio. I could hear his voice through the crackle. Need Emma to marshal. I trust her. Any of us could marshal a plane. You stand at the edge of the gravel with wands or a flashlight. Guide them in. Make sure no kids or dogs run onto the runway. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. I keyed the mic. Eli, this is Emma. I'm in the clinic with the patient. My partner can handle the runway. He chuckled. I'm not landing a caravan on barely plowed gravel without eyes I trust, he said lightly. Come on, nurse. I'll be there in 10. Bundle up. There was no time to argue. The patient needed to get out. I pulled on my parka, shoved my boots on, and jogged to the strip, radio still clipped to my vest. The northern lights rippled overhead, bright enough to cast shadows. The runway lights flickered to life as the plane's landing lights appeared in the distance. He put it down smooth as always, taxied up. When he opened the door, he grinned at me like we were sharing a private joke. See, he said, knew you'd come. I didn't answer. We loaded the patient. I gave report. He brushed my hand when he took the chart. Deliberate, slow. The health aide shot me a look over the elder's stretcher that said everything. Back at the clinic, she said quietly. He shouldn't talk to you like that on the radio. We can complain. I nodded. I meant it. But out there, your world gets small. Bethel was a long way away. The company was a voice on the other end of a phone that might or might not pick up. Eli was the one who showed up when the weather was bad. Complaining felt like sawing off the branch we were sitting on. I finally drew a firm line the night he made it clear how closely he'd been watching my life. It was spring, technically. Breakup. The river ice was rotting. Planes landed on wheels again instead of skis. Everyone was cranky and tired of snow. I'd been having a rough week, 3 deaths in 5 days, all elders, back to back. I posted a single photo on my private Instagram from the clinic porch. Huge sky, tiny village. Captioned, "Some days, this place takes more than it gives." 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Didn't know you had service out there," Eli wrote. "We should get you somewhere with a real hospital before this place eats you alive." My throat went dry. My Instagram was locked. Maybe 50 followers, mostly friends from nursing school and a few travel nurse colleagues. I hadn't accepted any new ones in months. "How did you see this?" I typed, ellipsis. Then, tiny place. Everyone's connected. Pretty easy to see what you're up to if you know where to look. I blocked his number. The next day, I called his company's operations manager on the sat phone, formal, professional. I laid it all out. The texts, the radio comments, the way he was tying patient care to whether I personally went to the runway. To their credit, they took it seriously. Another pilot flew our runs for a few weeks. Then I started noticing a snow machine parked on the hill above the airstrip in the evenings, just far enough that I couldn't make out the rider's face, just close enough that whoever it was could see the clinic, the school, my little house by the fuel tanks. Sometimes it was there when no planes were inbound at all. My health aide noticed too. "He's watching," she said simply. "He doesn't like that you told on him." We started drawing the blinds more. We stopped sitting on the clinic porch at night. I slept with my handheld radio next to my bed, volume low, listening to every plane that came and went. The elders talked to the tribal council. The council talked to the airline. Eli was reassigned to another region. Last I heard, he's flying on the North Slope now. Different villages, same sky. I left the YK that fall. I tell myself I did it for my career, for more experience, for better pay. The truth is I couldn't stand looking at that hill anymore, wondering if the next snow machine I heard would stop outside my house. If you work in a place where planes are your lifeline, it's easy to excuse things from the people who fly them. They're brave. They take risks. They get you out when the weather's bad. But no one is so essential that they get to decide whether you feel safe doing your job. If someone ties access, medical, physical, emotional, to whether you personally give them your time or your presence, that's not just bush culture. That's control. At least in the Delta, you can look up and see the plane coming. On the mountain roads, sometimes you don't see the danger until it's riding your bumper for 50 miles of ice. Story 3, Dalton Highway, Alaska. They call it the Haul Road. The Dalton, 414 miles from just north of Fairbanks up to Deadhorse on the Arctic Ocean. Mostly gravel, some pavement, all attitude. If you've driven it, you know. If you haven't, picture steep grades, blind corners, and 18-wheelers barreling past in clouds of dust and ice. I drove pilot car for a construction outfit for 2 seasons, summer and winter. My job was simple on paper. Lead convoys through our active work zones, keep track of trucks, make sure no tourists wandered into a ditch. In practice, it meant long days alone in a pickup, radio crackling, coffee going cold in the cup holder, while the Trans-Alaska pipeline snaked alongside like a silver spine. Our company had a safety officer named Ron. Every outfit on the slope does. Someone whose job it is to make sure you wear your PPE. Don't blow your knees out jumping off equipment. Don't get mauled by a bear you thought was just curious. The first time I met him, he seemed fine. Late 40s, beard, Carhartt everything, clipboard in hand. He introduced himself, shook my hand a little too long, said he was glad to finally have a woman with some sense on the team. I should have clocked it then. I didn't. I was too focused on proving I belonged. The haul road attracts a certain kind of person, the kind who thinks rules are suggestions and danger is a seasoning. I'd grown up in Fairbanks hearing stories about it. Trucks sliding off Adigun Pass, moose totaling pickups, tourists in rental cars with 4 spare tires in the back. When I finally got the job, I was proud. People warned me about the road. No one warned me about Ron. He started with little things. You don't need to caravan with them, he'd say when I lined up behind the other pickups in the morning. You're pilot. You go at the front. On paper, that was my job. But there's a difference between leading at the posted speed with trucks in sight and being sent 10, 15 miles ahead to check conditions. Call in every 10, he'd tell me on the company channel. I want to know you're okay. It sounded like concern. It looked like isolation. I'd find myself out of sight of anyone else on sections of road with 0 shoulders and drop-offs that made your stomach twist. If something had gone wrong, if a moose had jumped out, if my truck had blown a tire, if a drunk hunter had decided he didn't like the look of me, it would have been 20 minutes minimum before anyone reached me. More if the radios were busy. At first, I pushed back gently. I'm fine sticking closer to the group, I'd say. The tourists spook less if they can see the trucks behind me. He'd grin, you scared. He'd tease on the radio, knowing everyone could hear. Thought you were tougher than that. Nobody ever said anything. Nobody wanted to be the one who couldn't hack it on the haul road. Especially not me, the only woman on our crew. Then he started insisting I ride with him for safety checks. Hop in, he'd say at the staging area. Gotta show you a few things. Sometimes it was legit, pointing out soft shoulders, explaining how to read the snowdrifts for hidden ice. Other times he'd just drive, long stretches. No radio chatter, no trucks. He'd talk about his divorces, his theories about how people from outside didn't understand Alaska, how women in the lower 48 were soft now. You're not like that, he'd add. You get it. One night in December, full dark at 3 in the afternoon, he told me to stay after the rest of the crew had headed back to camp. Need to go over your logs, he said. Make sure you're by the book. We sat in his truck with the engine idling, heater blasting. He flipped through my notebook, not really reading, asking questions that had nothing to do with work. You got family? He asked. In Fairbanks, I said. Parents, little brother. Boyfriend? No. He smiled. This road will do that, he said. Scares them off, or brings the wrong kind on. I laughed politely, the way women are trained to do when someone says something that sets off every alarm bell, but isn't technically a threat. I started adding details to my mental list. Patterns, frequency, how often he managed to get me alone. The night tipped from creepy to dangerous. The temperature was 30 below and falling. We'd been working a section near the Yukon River crossing, putting up new guardrails. The day shift had gone long. By the time we finished picking cones, it was pitch black, and the aurora was starting to smear green across the sky. The truckers on the CB were all talking about some tourist RV that had tried to make the pass and spun out near Coldfoot. You take the rear tonight, our foreman said, handing me the pilot truck keys. Make sure the last semi gets through. I exhaled. Rear was easier. You could see everyone. You weren't the first one around a blind corner. Ron cut in. Nah, he said. She should run point. I need eyes up front. Already did my stint up front, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Let one of the guys take a turn. He tilted his head. You arguing with a safety directive? He asked, still smiling, but with an edge now. Because we can talk about that in the office. On the slope, safety is the magic word. It justifies anything. Extra shifts, delays, write-ups. If you get labeled as someone who doesn't respect safety, you don't work. Period. So I took the keys. Lead 'em nice and slow, he said. I'll be right behind you. I pulled out ahead of the convoy, my light bar reflecting off the snowbanks. The road surface was a mix of packed snow and patches of glare ice polished by studded tires. I kept my speed at a cautious 30, calling out mile markers and conditions on the company channel. Copy, Ron's voice came back each time. Always calm, always just behind. After about 20 miles, my mirrors were full of nothing but darkness. No headlights from the semis. No glow of the rest of our pickups. just my own beams cutting through the blowing snow. And far behind, a single set of lights I assumed was Ron. I tried the CB. Convoy, this is pilot. You guys still with me? Static. Then a trucker's voice. We're about 10 miles back, darlin'. Ron pulled us over round pump station 2. Said he needed to check something with your truck. My hands went slick on the wheel. Say again. Said you'd be fine running ahead. She knows this road, he says. I'll catch her up later. Behind me, on the company channel, Ron's voice crackled. Road looks good up here. Keep coming. Pilot, check in at the next mile marker. He was right behind me. He was the only one behind me. Every horror story I'd ever read about women on isolated roads hit me all at once. I was 50 miles from the nearest anything in either direction. Temperature dropping. No cell service. One man between me and my crew. I made a decision. Copy, I said on the company channel, as evenly as I could. Stopping at the next wide spot to chain up. You don't need chains, Ron replied. You're doing fine. I ignored him. Spotted a plow turn out a mile ahead and eased into it, heart hammering. I keyed up the CB, not the company radio. Any northbound trucks? This is pilot car at mile. I squinted at the post. 253. I'm pulled out at a turnout. Need a hand checking something. There's a code on that road. You don't ignore calls like that. Within 30 seconds, a driver answered. Pilot at 253. This is polar northbound. 5 minutes out. You okay? Will be when you get here, I said. Appreciate it. On the company channel, Ron's tone sharpened. Why are you stopping? Thought I felt something off in the steering, I lied. Want to check it before I end up in the ditch. Polar S gonna give me a second set of eyes. Silence. Then, too casually. You don't need a trucker for that. I'll be there in a minute. My palms were sweating inside my gloves. I turned off my headlights, but left the hazards on, climbed out, and popped the hood just to have something to do. The wind knifed through my coveralls. The sky above was an explosion of stars. 2 minutes later, I saw the glow of Polar's headlights cresting the hill. Big old Kenworth, familiar blue stripe. When he pulled in behind me, blocking the turnout from the lane, I could have cried with relief. Thought you said she was fine. The driver's voice came over the CB, open for anyone to hear. You got a problem up here, pilot. I keyed my mic. Appreciate you stopping, I said. Felt a wobble, maybe just the wind. Ron's pickup appeared behind Polar, his lights forced to a stop by 40 tons of diesel and steel. He got out, stomping up with his clipboard. You can't just pull over wherever you feel like it, he snapped, voice low but fierce. You put yourself at risk doing this. Polar's driver, big guy, mid-50s, the kind who's seen everything twice, stepped between us like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She did the right thing," he said mildly. "If you feel something off, you stop. Better here than upside down in a ravine." Ron's jaw worked. For a second, I thought he might argue. Then he plastered on a smile that didn't come close to his eyes. "Of course," he said. "Just want to keep everyone safe." For the rest of that run, I refused to go more than a quarter mile ahead of the convoy. If Ron complained on the radio, I ignored it. When we got back to camp, I went straight to the foreman's office. I didn't accuse him of anything dramatic. I didn't talk about my fear. I used their language instead. "From a safety standpoint," I said, "it's not appropriate for me to be sent miles ahead of the group alone in poor conditions. And it's not appropriate for the safety officer to separate me from the convoy like that." The foreman frowned. "He's just trying to keep traffic moving." "Traffic can wait," I said. "OSHA would have a field day if they saw how far out of sight I was. If I end up in a ditch or have a medical emergency out there, our response time is unacceptable. It shouldn't have to be about regulations to matter. Out there, it does." Ron got coached. He stopped sending me miles ahead. He stopped pulling the convoy over conveniently when I was in front. He started being coolly polite instead of overly friendly. The vibe shifted from patronizing interest to simmering resentment. I finished the season. I didn't go back the next year. People romanticize the Haul Road. They make TV shows about ice road truckers and wild Alaska, and how tough you have to be to work up there. What they don't show you is how easy it is for someone with a little authority and a lot of isolation to put you in situations that aren't just risky because of the weather. If someone keeps finding reasons to get you alone for safety, pay attention to what that safety actually looks like. Does it involve more backup, more eyes, or fewer? The road is dangerous enough. You don't need a person in your convoy making it worse. Some people use distance and bad roads to isolate you. Others use walls and locked doors in places that were supposed to be a retreat, like a lodge that shuts down for the winter with just you and the cameras. Story 4. Story 4, Denali area, Alaska. Some people pay thousands of dollars to stay where I worked. Remote wilderness lodge north of Denali. Accessible by a gravel road in summer and snow machine in winter. Postcard views. Northern lights. Gourmet food. Disconnect from the modern world, the brochure said. Experience true Alaskan solitude. In the summer, it was busy. Guests from all over the world, couples taking once-in-a-lifetime trips, photographers, retirees in brand new hiking boots. The staff lived in bunkhouses, ate family style in the kitchen, traded horror stories about mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds. It was hard work, but there were always people around. Noise, laughter, radio chatter with the shuttle drivers. In the winter, it was just me and the owner's son. The arrangement sounded good when I took it. I'd done 2 seasons as a housekeeper and server at the lodge. When the owner offered me a winter caretaker job, it felt like a promotion. Better pay, private cabin, free food, a chance to save money, and have my own space for once. My son Kyle will be up there too, she said. He handles maintenance and the generators. You two can share duties. It's quiet in the winter. You'll have plenty of time to yourself. I'd met Kyle in passing. Tall, mid-30s, beard. The kind of guy who wore expensive technical gear like it was second skin. I knew he handled the technical side of the lodge. I didn't know much else. He'd always been polite, a little intense. But so are a lot of people who choose to live off the road system. I moved in at the end of September. Last guests gone. Water system winterized. Summer staff gone back to Anchorage, Fairbanks, Oregon, wherever. The owner and her husband left in the final shuttle, hugging me tight, thanking me for keeping an eye on things. You call if you need anything, she said, squeezing my shoulders. Kyle knows the systems, but you're not alone up here. We've got satellite internet, sat phone, all of it. The first few weeks were beautiful. There's no other word. Snow dusted the peaks. The river slowed. Moose wandered through the property like they owned it. The sky at night was a sheet of stars. My job was simple. Check the buildings. Keep the main lodge heated enough to prevent damage. Clear snow from the generator shed. Keep the pipes from freezing. Kyle handled the mechanical stuff and shuttled into town every couple weeks for supplies. We weren't friends, exactly. More like co-workers with different shifts. He spent most of his time in the maintenance building or in his cabin by the back of the property. We'd cross paths in the kitchen, trade small talk about weather and snow depth, then retreat to our own corners. The first time I felt weird about him was over something small. I was in the staff kitchen one night, microwaving leftovers, music playing softly from my phone. Kyle came in without saying anything and turned the volume down. Sorry, I said automatically. Too loud. He shrugged. Just don't like not hearing what's going on, he said. You know, out there was 40 miles of trees and mountains with no neighbors. The only what's going on was wind, snow, and the occasional fox. It's fine, I said, turning the music off completely. Didn't realize it bothered you. He smiled, quick and tight. "You'll sleep better if you can hear stuff," he said. "Trust me." Little things kept adding up. He always seemed to know where I was. If I went to the gear room to inventory snowshoes, he'd show up 5 minutes later looking for a wrench. If I spent the afternoon in the main lodge cleaning, he'd wander through and ask what I was working on, even though the windows made it obvious. "Just doing my rounds," he'd say, "making sure everything's secure." I started feeling watched in a place that was supposed to be about being unseen. Winter came hard and fast. By late October, the road out was snowed in enough that only tracked vehicles could make it. Kyle had a big, expensive snow machine. He used to go to the highway once every week or two, when weather allowed, to meet town runs and pick up supplies. I didn't have my own machine. If I wanted to leave, I had to ask him. "Safer that way," the owner had said. "Roads brutal in winter. Kyle knows it." When the first big storm hit, 3 feet of powder in 24 hours, followed by a hard wind that sculpted the drifts like concrete, we were effectively sealed in. No one was getting in or out for at least a week, maybe more. I knew that going in. I hadn't factored in what it would feel like to be snowed in with someone who'd started to feel off. The cameras were supposed to be for bears. That's what the brochure said, anyway. For your safety, our exterior wildlife cameras monitor the property for large animals. Guests loved watching clips of moose and bears wandering through on the lobby TV in the summer. I'd noticed the little domes in corners, hallways, stairwells, the kitchen. Again, for safety. Slip and fall liability. Staff disputes. Normal stuff for a business that hosted rich people far from hospitals. The first time I realized the cameras were doing more than that, I was sitting in the empty dining room reading a book after finishing my chores. Fire going in the stone fireplace. Snow falling thick outside the big picture windows. It felt like living in my own private postcard. Kyle walked in without knocking, looked around, then said, "Thought you were in your cabin." "Just finished lunch," I said. Decided to read by the fire for a bit. He frowned, like he was recalculating something. "You always take your lunch back," he said. "Figured you'd be in your bunk by now." I shrugged. Needed a change of scenery. "You should tell me when you change your routine," he said. His tone was light, but there was a current under it. "Helps me keep track. Safety, you know. You don't need to keep track of me," I said, trying to sound joking instead of defensive. "I'm an adult." He smiled that tight smile again. "This place eats people who get careless," he said. "You haven't done a winter here yet." "I have. Just do me a favor and don't wander off schedule without letting me know, okay?" I nodded, but inside something twisted. It wasn't the words as much as the idea. My schedule was data he felt entitled to, something he used to orient himself. The lodge wasn't just a place to him. It was a system he controlled. 2 weeks later, I found the first hidden camera. We had a cold snap that made the wood stoves work overtime. I was in one of the guest cabins, doing a mid-winter check on pipes and wiring. The sun was a pale smear on the horizon at noon. I flicked on the light in the bedroom and noticed a small, newer-looking smoke detector on the ceiling, different from the older, yellowed one in the hallway. The lodge had been built in stages. Some fixtures were newer than others. It wasn't unusual, but something about the placement bugged me. The bedroom already had a smoke alarm by the door. Why add a second one above the bed? On a hunch, I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and twisted the cover off. No sensor. No test button. Just a tiny lens and a cluster of electronics. A pinhole camera wired into the ceiling. My heart dropped into my boots. I checked the other guest cabins. Same thing. Above beds. In bathrooms. In the small private sauna suite we rented out to honeymooners. All newer than the lodge's original build. All the exact same model. I didn't say anything to Kyle right away. I wanted proof of where the footage went. That night, when I knew he was in the generator shed doing checks, I went into the back room off the staff hallway, the one marked electrical. I'd never had reason to go in there before. Inside, breaker panels, shelves of bulbs and fuses, and a metal cabinet with a tang of warm electronics. In the cabinet, neatly labeled, were 2 network video recorders. Each had a small monitor attached, both turned off. I turned one on. 24 camera feeds sprung to life. Exterior angles, dining room, lobby, hallways, kitchen, staff lounge, guest cabins, my cabin. On the screen, a time-stamped view of my bunk room appeared, my duffel on the floor, my coat on a hook, the unmade bed I'd left in a hurry that morning. The resolution was so sharp I could read the title of the book on my nightstand. My stomach lurched. My hands shook on the mouse. I clicked through recorded clips. In each one was me, sleeping, changing, reading, picking my nose, dancing when I thought no one was watching. Every private, boring, human thing I'd done in that room since October, all stored in time-stamped files. The oldest clips were from the summer. Staff goofing off in the bunkhouse, guests in the hot tub, couples in cabins, people who'd paid a small fortune for privacy. I scrolled back further and found files from the previous winter caretakers. 2 women, then one, then none. I was still staring at the screen when I heard the doorknob turn. Kyle stepped into the room, saw the monitor, and froze. For a second, neither of us moved. "You weren't supposed to be in here," he said. His voice was quiet, flat. I swallowed, every instinct screaming at me to keep my face neutral. The breaker popped in the kitchen, I lied. I came to reset it, saw the cabinet, was curious. He glanced at the panel. The kitchen breaker was fine. We both knew it. He stepped closer to the monitor. My bunkroom feed stared back at us. "This is for security," he said. "Bears, trespassers, liability. We've had problems with people sneaking into the property in the off-season. Then why are there cameras in the bathrooms?" I asked. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "In the staff cabins." He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Staff steal," he said. "Guests lie. You know how much people sue over nothing these days. This protects everyone. Does your mom know?" I asked. "Do the guests?" He didn't answer, which was an answer. My mind was racing. We were 40 miles from the nearest anything. Even if I got to the highway, I'd still be out in the middle of nowhere. No cell service, limited daylight, deep snow. If I confronted him too hard, what then? I stepped back from the monitor. "You need to shut off the ones in my cabin," I said, controlling my voice with effort. "Now. And you need to shut off anything pointed at bathrooms. That's illegal." He watched me for a long moment. Then he reached past me and flicked a switch on the back of the recorder. My bunkroom feed went dark. "Happy?" he asked. "No," I said, "but it's a start." We stared at each other in the hum of the electrical room. "You know you're not going anywhere until breakup," he said finally. "Roads impassable. No machine of your own. Nobody's coming up here for months." He was right on one point. Physically, I wasn't getting out until March without his help. But he'd made a mistake showing me exactly how he liked to keep track of things. Systems can be turned against their creators. That night, back in my cabin with every light on and every blind closed, I dug my satellite phone out of the emergency cupboard. The owner had left it for real emergencies. I decided this qualified. I didn't call her first. I called a friend in Anchorage who worked in hospitality law. I told her everything. The cameras, the feeds, the way Kyle timed his arrivals, the fact that guests had never been informed of surveillance in private spaces. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't tell me to wait until spring. She told me which words to use. "Record everything you can," she said. "Take photos, video. Then call your boss and use the words invasion of privacy and civil liability. And do not tell Kyle you're doing it." The next day, while Kyle was out checking the fuel tanks, I went back into the electrical room and filmed the monitors with my phone. I took screenshots of file lists, zooming in on dates that matched reservation logs I knew by heart. I emailed everything to my friend over the sputtering satellite connection. Then I called the owner. first, she was defensive. "We have to protect our property," she said. "We've had people vandalize cabins. We've had theft. You have cameras in showers," I said quietly. "You have cameras in staff bedrooms. If one guest finds out, one staff member goes public, this whole place goes down. You know that." Silence, then a sharp inhale. "Kyle told me it was just exterior," she said. "Hallways, common areas." "It's not." Another long silence. I could imagine her sitting in her warm house in town, picturing the lodge she'd built turning into a lawsuit. "Pack your things," she said finally. "I'm sending a snow machine for you tomorrow." "You can't make it up here in this weather," I said. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm sending someone who doesn't answer to my son." The next day, a guide I vaguely knew from summer, Tom, quiet, competent, more trustworthy than most, showed up on a long track ski-doo. Exhaust steaming in the cold. "Boss said you needed a ride," he said simply. Kyle watched from the maintenance building doorway as I loaded a duffel and my backpack onto the sled. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look on his face, betrayal, anger, something darker, was enough. As we rode out, the lodge shrinking behind us, I kept glancing back at the dark windows. Little glass eyes, all of them. Later, I heard through the grapevine that the owner had quietly ripped out every camera not strictly necessary for security. That she'd handled things with Kyle. I don't know what that means. I don't work there anymore. I don't plan to. People think wilderness is the scary part. Bears, getting lost, falling through ice. All of that is real. But the scariest thing for me was realizing that the person in charge of the systems designed to keep people safe had turned them into something else entirely, and that he'd done it in a place where he controlled not just the cameras, but when and how I could leave. If someone ever tells you isolation is part of the charm, ask who controls the doors. And if you find a camera where it shouldn't be, believe what it's telling you about the person who put it there. On the coast, the doors don't lock. They just float, because sometimes the only way out of an isolated situation is on a boat controlled by the same man who signs your paycheck. Story 5. Story 5, Bristol Bay, Alaska. Every summer, Bristol Bay turns into another planet. Planes constantly in the air. Boats stacked 3 deep at the docks. Processing plants running 24 hours a day while the sockeye run. Money everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Millions of dollars of fish coming over the rails, while the people actually doing the work sleep in bunks the size of coffin lockers. I signed up as a processor right out of high school. 19. Hungry for adventure, cash, something other than my inland hometown. The recruiter in Seattle painted it like an adventure. Hard work, Big paychecks, camaraderie, he said. You'll be bone tired and filthy, and you'll never forget it. He was right about some of that. Our cannery was on the Naknek River, a squat maze of metal buildings and conveyor belts and bunkhouses. The first week is overwhelming. The smell hits you first fish and diesel and bleach. Then the noise, machines, forklifts, people yelling over everything. After a while, it becomes a kind of white noise you sleep to. The processors lived in stacked bunks in long, narrow rooms off a central hall. My room had 8 women from all over Oregon, Minnesota, Anchorage, a girl from Mexico on a temporary work visa. We worked 12 to 16-hour shifts, 7 days a week, gutting, filleting, boxing, cleaning. You stopped keeping track of days and started counting by breaks. Our foreman was a man named Dale, 50s, barrel-chested, grew up in the Bay, the kind of guy who wore a baseball cap with the bill's sweat stained white and chewed sunflower seeds constantly. He ran our line like a drill sergeant, yelled a lot, rarely smiled, but he got the work done, and the older processors said that mattered more than whether he was nice. If you get on his good side, he'll give you overtime. One of the returning girls told me my first week. If you piss him off, he'll stick you on slime line until you cry. I didn't want slime line. I wanted the money. So I did what most girls do in those situations. Kept my head down, did my job, laughed off the comments. The first joke was about rain gear. We'd just finished a 16-hour shift. My arms felt like noodles. Dale walked by as I was hanging up my oilskins and said, "You fill those out pretty good for someone from the valley." The guys laughed. I pretended to smile, that practiced, tight-cheeked smile women learn when we don't want to show we're uncomfortable. It felt easier than making a fuss in a place where everyone was exhausted and touchy and far from home. He started calling me Seattle, even though I wasn't from there. "Hey, Seattle, grab that tote. Seattle, you're on trim today." It wasn't the worst nickname. Others had gotten worse, but he always said it a certain way when we were alone. Drawn out, possessive. Power in a cannery is simple math. Who writes the schedule? Who decides who gets OT? Who signs your timesheet and your end-of-season evaluation that might get you rehired next year? Dale had all of that. Most of the processors were on H-2B or J-1 visas. Students from Eastern Europe, Latin America, Asia. Their entire reason for being there hinged on staying in good standing with the company. If they got sent home early or labeled problem employees, they might not get another chance. I was one of the few U.S. kids. In theory, that gave me more freedom. In practice, it just meant I had fewer illusions about how replaceable we all were. The incident that made me finally see the situation for what it was started with the words, special project. It was mid-July, peak of the run. We were at the point where time blurred and your hands moved on autopilot. I was half asleep on my feet when Dale tapped me on the shoulder. "Seattle," he said. "Need you on a special project tonight instead of the line." "What kind of project?" I asked, brain struggling to shift gears. He jerked his head toward the door. "Bring your rain gear. We'll talk outside." We walked down to the dock. The air was cold and wet. Boats bumped against the pilings, their deck lights glowing in the mist. He led me to the far end, away from the other crews. "Got a tender coming in late," he said. "Full load. We're short-handed. Need someone I can trust to help with offload." It sounded legitimate. Hard work, sure, but someone had to do it. The bay doesn't stop because you're tired. "Okay," I said. "Who else is on it?" He smiled. "Just you and me," he said. Less confusion that way. Every instinct in my body went on alert. 2 people alone on a dock with no cameras, no supervisors, no one paying attention. One of them, a man who'd already tested my boundaries in smaller ways. "Offloads take at least 4, I said. "Company policy." He shrugged. "Policy's flexible when we're slammed. You want the overtime or not?" There it was. The hook. I thought about the money. I thought about the fact that my bunkmates were asleep or still online, that no one would think it was weird for me to be gone with him during a busy night. I thought about the stories whispered in the bunkhouse, girls cornered in freezer rooms, guys who accidentally walked in while someone was changing. "I can't," I said finally. "I'm beat. My wrist is killing me. Maybe grab one of the guys." His face tightened almost imperceptibly. "You telling me no?" he asked. "I'm saying I'm not the right person for this tonight," I replied, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "You want it done right. You need a full crew." We stared at each other in the sodium yellow dock lights. "Suit yourself," he said eventually. "Don't come crying to me when you're short on hours at the end of the season." The next week, my schedule shifted. Less OT, more grunt work, slime line, bathrooms. He didn't say it was punishment. He didn't have to. Looking back, I'm glad I said no. Money wasn't worth being alone on a dark dock with a man who'd already shown he didn't respect boundaries. Then he started targeting the girls who couldn't say no as easily. Camilla was from Mexico City, 22, on a J1 visa, sweet, shy, working every shift she could to send money home. One night I noticed she wasn't at breakfast. Later that day, I saw her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "You okay?" I asked in Spanish, out of earshot of the others. She hesitated. Then it all came spilling out. Dale had asked her for special projects too. twice. First time, he'd kept it to comments and lingering hands. Second time, he'd cornered her in the tote room. He said if I wanted more hours, I had to be agrade sitta, she whispered, grateful. He said if I complained, they'd send me home, that he'd tell the company I started it. I believed her. There was nothing in her demeanor that suggested she was exaggerating. If anything, she was downplaying it to make it bearable to say out loud. We were both stuck. She needed the job more than I did. I didn't want to be the white girl swooping in to save the international workers. But I also knew staying quiet was exactly what men like Dale counted on. I started documenting everything. Comments, schedule changes, who he picked for extra tasks, where and when. I wrote it all down in a notebook I kept hidden in my duffel. The tipping point came at the end of the season when payroll errors mysteriously showed up. Payday was chaos every year. People crowded into the office to pick up checks, compare numbers, argue about hours. When mine hit my hand, I knew it was light. I might not have known the exact number, but my body did. There's a way your bones feel after 16-hour days for 4 weeks. You know what you've earned. Camilla's check was even worse. They're missing a whole week, she said, voice shaking. I wrote it down. We went to the office together. The clerk, overworked, irritated, pulled out our time cards. Both had adjustments in different ink, both with Dale's initials. He said you guys were late sometimes, she said. Said you disappeared from line without telling anyone. We stared at the cards. I knew exactly when we'd disappeared. On nights, he'd tried to get us alone, and we ducked into the bathroom or stuck close to other crew. You need to talk to your foreman if you have a problem, the clerk said. We just go off what he gives us. Write our options. Confront the man who'd been punishing us quietly for weeks, or accept being underpaid and hope for better next season. Except there was another option. Most cannery workers don't realize how much leverage they have until they act together. One person complaining is a nuisance. 10 is a pattern. 20 gets corporate attention. I didn't start a formal union campaign or anything dramatic. I did something smaller but effective. I started talking, quietly, targeted, to the right people. Check your hours, I told everyone in my bunkhouse. Not just the total, the daily. Especially if Dale signs your card. Word spread. Within a day, half a dozen girls and a few guys realized their checks were short too. Missing OT, random deductions. All with the same initials next to them. One of the older processors, a guy who'd been coming up for a decade and had less to lose, called the regional HR number posted on a faded flyer in the hallway. He used the words wage theft and harassment in the same sentence. When corporate HR shows up in a place like that, everyone notices. They did audits, private interviews, quiet conversations in offices that smelled like fish and printer ink. They pulled time cards and camera footage from the few public areas that had coverage. Dale disappeared halfway through the week. No explanation, just gone. Our checks were reissued with corrections 2 days later. We were told to come back next season, that things would be different. I never went back. Last I heard, Dale is banned from working for that company. Maybe he's on someone else's dock now. Maybe he finally learned a lesson. Maybe he didn't. Men like him tend to land on their feet in places that value what they produce more than how they behave. What I learned is this: isolation and power are a dangerous mix. When your boss controls your hours, your housing, your access to the one flight a week back to town, and your pay, it's easy for him to convince you you're lucky to be there at all, that you should be grateful for any extra opportunity he throws your way. If your paycheck looks wrong, if your schedule shifts every time you say no, if your foreman only ever picks girls who can't easily leave for special projects, that's not just how things are. That's a pattern. Document it. Talk to each other. Don't let them keep you isolated in a place that's already as far from home as you've ever been. Not all isolation is in bunkhouses and boats. Sometimes it comes with assigned cabins on a ferry that rocks through the night. While one passenger always seems to be on board, trip after trip, no matter where the ship goes. Story 6. Story 6. Inside Passage, Alaska. If you've ever taken the Alaska Marine Highway, you probably remember the romance of it. Sleeping in a lawn chair under the solarium heaters, watching whales surface off the bow, pulling into tiny ports at odd hours, while the loudspeaker crackles with names you've only seen on maps: Rangel, Petersburg, Cake. For most people, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. For me, it was just work. I was a steward on one of the mainline state ferries that runs from Bellingham up through southeast Alaska. 16 days on, 12 off. We cleaned cabins, ran the cafeteria, changed linens, answered questions. We saw all kinds of passengers, tourists with cameras, locals hauling groceries, kids heading to college, elders going to medical appointments. We also saw the same faces over and over. Commercial drivers who lived on the road, fishermen, people who timed their lives around the ship's schedule. Most of them blurred together into a general sense of regulars, except for one. We called him the Reader. That wasn't his real name, obviously. I didn't learn that for a long time. He was mid-40s, maybe. Average height, dark hair, always under a cap. Wore the same navy jacket and jeans every time I saw him. He carried a beat-up paperback everywhere, and always sat in the same chair in the forward lounge, third row from the front, port side, next to the window. The first time I noticed him was on a northbound run in May. He boarded in Ketchikan with a rolling suitcase and a backpack, like any other passenger. I clocked him mostly because he didn't leave the lounge for hours. Some people wandered. He didn't. He read. Occasionally looked up. Watched people more than scenery. At least he's quiet, one of my coworkers said when I mentioned him. Give me 10 readers over one bachelor party any day. I agreed. We had enough rowdy drunks to deal with. A quiet guy with a book was the least of our worries. Except he kept showing up. 2 weeks later, different run, I saw him again. Same spot. Same book, or maybe a different one with the same cracked spine. I assumed he was making the full Bellingham Skagway run like some snowbirds do. But on the manifest, his ticket was only from Juneau to Haines. Short hop. Next shift, southbound. There he was again, boarding in Juneau this time, disembarking in Ketchikan. Always alone. Always in the same chair. Man practically lives on this boat. One of the pursers joked when I pointed it out. Maybe we should start charging him rent. At first, it was just a running gag. There's your boyfriend, my friend Kari would whisper when we passed him in the lounge. We'd laugh. I'd roll my eyes. He never caused trouble. Never drank too much. Always had his ticket. Always paid his bill. Then he started remembering things he shouldn't have known. We rotated through cabin cleaning duties. Some trips I'd be in housekeeping, other trips in the galley. On a southbound run in July, I'd been assigned to cabins. Long day. Back-to-back turnarounds in Juneau and Sitka. I was tired enough that my brain felt wrapped in cotton. As I walked through the lounge, the reader looked up from his book and said, "Long day, huh, Jenna?" I stopped. I hadn't introduced myself. We wore name tags, sure, but I was in a fleece without mine. I checked. Blank. "How do you know my name?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He smiled. "Heard one of your coworkers say it," he said. "You're always rushing, like you're trying to be everywhere at once." It was plausible. We yelled each other's names across the deck all the time. Still, something about the way he said it made my skin prickle, like he'd been cataloging details. "That's the job," I said, and moved on. Over the next month, he popped up on at least half my runs. Always a different segment. Juneau to Petersburg, Ketchikan to Rangel, Haines to Juneau. Never point to point like a commuter. Always patchwork. One night, while I was wiping down tables in the cafeteria during the 3 a.m. lull between ports, he came through the line for coffee. "You're on nights a lot," he said casually as I handed him a cup. "We rotate," I said. He shook his head. "You don't. he said. At least not when I'm on. He said it like he'd been tracking it. Like my schedule was something he'd mapped out. We have strict policies about crew and passengers. No fraternizing. No giving out personal info. No being alone with a passenger in a closed space if you can help it. The reader had never crossed those lines overtly. No touching. No comments about my body. Just this quiet, unnerving attention. The thing that finally snapped the pattern into focus for me was cabins. Stewards see who's in which cabin. We clean them. We notice who leaves things messy, who tips well, who stiffed us. The reader, as far as official records went, never booked one. He always had a deck ticket. Lounge only. Except I started hearing his footsteps in places he shouldn't have been. Cabin corridors have a specific sound, different from public lounges. Carpeted doors every few feet, soft thump of luggage against walls. One night on a southbound, I was stripping beds on deck 6 when I heard someone walking slowly down the hall behind me. I glanced up, expecting another steward. It was him. "Can I help you?" I asked, forcing a professional smile. He held up his hands like I'd caught him doing something wrong. "Just stretching my legs," he said. "Can't sleep in those chairs sometimes." Deck 6 cabins were reserved. You didn't just stretch your legs up there. You had to pass a crew-only sign and 2 closed fire doors to get there. "Passenger areas are down on deck 4, I said. "You can't be up here unless you have a cabin." He looked at the room numbers, then back at me. "You're in 612 tonight, right?" he asked. "Crew bunk." My stomach dropped. Cabin assignments weren't posted. We got them on a clipboard in the steward's office. I hadn't told anyone mine out loud. "No," I lied. "That's not me." He smiled like we were sharing a joke. "Right," he said. "Must have mixed it up." He turned and walked back down the hall, steps unhurried. That night, I double-latched my cabin door and pushed my duffel against it for good measure. I started paying closer attention. Every time he was on board, weird little coincidences piled up. He'd be in the passageway when I came off break, in the stairwell when I went from galley to cabins, in the viewing lounge exactly when I walked through. No matter what time of day or night it was. "You're imagining it," Kari said when I brought it up. "He's just a bored guy who likes the ferry. Don't make him bigger than he is." Maybe she was right. Maybe the isolation and the weird hours were making me paranoid. Then came the Hoona incident. We pulled into Hoona on a gray morning, low clouds, drizzle, the whole town smelling like wet wood and diesel. It was a quick stop. Offload a handful of cars, take on a few locals and their Costco runs, roll on. As we undocked, I went out on deck to coil lines. The reader was there, standing by the rail, hood up, watching the dock recede. ever been ashore here?" he asked. "On layover," I said. "Why?" "Nice little town," he said. "Easy to disappear in." I didn't like the way he said that. That afternoon, while cleaning cabins between Juneau and Petersburg, I found a note slipped under my door. Plain white paper, neat, careful handwriting. "You look tired," it said. "Cabin corridors are quiet at night. Might be safer for you to sleep there instead of under the heaters. I can make sure no one bothers you. No signature. No room number, just that." I went straight to the chief steward. He took it more seriously than I expected. Maybe the look on my face helped. "We've had issues before," he said carefully. "Guys who treat the crew like part of the entertainment. You did the right thing bringing this to me." He asked if I knew who it was from. I hesitated. I didn't have proof, just a gut feeling and too many coincidences. "I have a strong suspicion," I said. "The guy with the book in the forward lounge. Dark hair. Always on board." He sighed. "We can't ban someone without cause," he said. "But we can pay attention." From then on, we had 2 stewards on night shift instead of 1. We checked cabin corridors more often. We made sure someone walked me to my bunk at the end of my shift when he was on board. The moment things escalated from creepy to dangerous was on a foggy northbound run in September. We were between Petersburg and Cake, threading through narrow channels with the foghorn going every 2 minutes. Visibility off the bow was maybe 100 yards. The ship felt smaller when you couldn't see anything beyond the rail. Like the whole world had narrowed to steel and carpet and fluorescent light. I was restocking linens on deck 5 when the PA crackled. "Security to cabin 507, the captain's voice said. "Security to 507. We almost never used the PA for specific cabins. My heart rate spiked. 507 was a passenger cabin, occupied, according to the manifest, by a woman traveling alone from Juneau to Sitka. I grabbed my radio. "Steward on 5. I'm near 507, I said. "What's going on?" The mate's voice came back. "Possible disturbance," he said. "Guest reported someone trying her door." I was 2 doors down. I jogged the rest of the way as fast as you can jog on a moving ship. The passenger, a woman in her 50s, cracked the door on the security chain when she heard my knock. "Someone was jiggling my handle," she whispered. "I thought it was you with towels, but when I asked who it was, they didn't answer." "Did you see them?" I asked. She shook her head. "Heard footsteps, then nothing." Security arrived behind me. Big guy. Quiet. He checked the hallway camera. Tiny, grainy feed, but enough to see a figure in a dark jacket pause at 507, hand on the knob, then move on when the chain rattled. We watched the playback 3 times. "Can you zoom in?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. You couldn't see the man's face, but you could see the paperback in his left hand. Security talked to the captain. The captain talked to the reader. I don't know what was said in that meeting. I know that when we pulled into Sitka, he was escorted off the vessel by 2 troopers who happened to be waiting on the dock. I thought that was the end of it. It was. A month later, on my off time in Juneau, I was walking to the grocery store when a car slowed beside me. Old Subaru, out-of-state plates. The window rolled down. "You look different without the uniform," a familiar voice said. The reader sat behind the wheel, hands loose at 10 and 2. No book this time. Every muscle in my body went rigid. "You can't talk to me off the ship," I said. My voice sounded thin in my own ears. He smiled. "Public sidewalk," he said. "Free country. Just wanted to say hi." You demoted me without even knowing my side of the story. "You tried a passenger's cabin door at 3 in the morning," I said. The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's all I need to know." He shrugged. "She misread the situation," he said. "You're misreading this. I like ferries. I like watching people. That's not a crime." He glanced at my reusable grocery bag. "Cabin 612 was a nice spot, though," he added. "Quiet, good view. Hope they give you something similar on the new schedule." I hadn't told anyone my new cabin assignment yet. The crew roster had posted that morning. "If you come near me again," I said, "on or off the ship, I will file a report. You're not just some guy with a book. You know that, and I know that." We held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then he smiled, that same small, knowing smile I'd seen 100 times in the lounge, rolled up the window, and drove away. I transferred off ferries the next season, took a job at a hotel in town. Less adventure, less ocean, more sleep. I still miss the sound of whales at night and the way the inside passage looks at dawn. But I don't miss wondering which passenger knows exactly where I sleep. If you work somewhere that moves ships, planes, trains, it's easy for people to blur together. Don't ignore the ones who keep showing up. The ones who learn your schedule. The ones who treat your workplace like their living room. Policies exist for a reason. Use them. And if someone who made you feel unsafe on the job just happens to show up in your town on your day off, that's not a coincidence. That's escalation. Out on the park's highway, the tourists come and go. In Talkeetna, the guides track them on clipboards and whiteboards. But what do you do when the person checking in doesn't show up in town at all, only in your satellite messages? Story 7. Story 7, Talkeetna, Alaska. Talkeetna in summer feels like a movie set. Tiny downtown, gravel streets, tourists in brand new flannel and clean hiking boots, planes buzzing overhead, taking climbers and sightseers up to Denali. On a clear day, the mountain fills the sky at the end of Main Street like a painted backdrop. I worked in the office of one of the flight seeing and guiding companies. Not a glamorous job. Phones, emails, whiteboard full of bookings and weather windows. But it put me at the center of everything: who was flying where, when they were due back, what routes were open. We used satellite messengers for all our trips. In-reach units. Yellow bricks, we called them. Each plane and guided trip carried one. They sent location pings every 10 minutes and short texts when people needed to communicate off-grid. All good, running late. Client rolled ankle, heading back. Weather tanking, bivvying here. My job included monitoring those messages and relaying anything important to pilots, guides, or family members waiting in town. The first weird one came on a Tuesday in July, right after lunch rush. Phones had finally quieted. I was updating the board when the InReach web portal chimed. New message from an unrecognized device ID. Not one of ours. Sometimes visiting guides or private pilots pinged us if they needed conditions, so it wasn't unheard of. The text was simple. Talkeetna Air Desk, can you see me? I frowned. The device name just said GARMIN 7F2, a default. The map plotted a point about 15 miles up the river. On a glacier tourist, flights often circled. I typed back, "This is Talkeetna Air. Who is this? Are you in distress?" "No distress," came the reply almost instantly. "Just checking in, like your blue sweater." I froze, looked down. I was wearing a blue sweater, nothing unusual, really. But the office didn't have big windows. Just a door with a small pane of glass and a side window that looked out on the parking lot, not the desk. I turned slowly toward the front. Two tourists reading brochures. A pilot filling his coffee mug. No one looking in. I chalked it up to coincidence. Blue sweaters aren't exactly rare. I typed, "This line is for operational use only. Please contact our main number for non-emergencies." No response. The icon on the map stayed put for an hour, then disappeared when the device went out of range or powered down. I cleared the alert and went back to work. 2 days later, same device pinged again. "Nice braid today," it said. I hadn't worn my hair in a braid on Tuesday. I had that day. Over my right shoulder, elastic at the end, hidden enough that someone driving by probably wouldn't notice, but obvious to anyone standing across the counter. I walked outside under the pretense of checking the weather. The street was its usual summer chaos. People eating ice cream, kids petting husky puppies, climbers comparing gear. No one paid me more attention than any other office girl in logo gear. I went back in and checked the map. The device's location, this time plotted almost directly over town. Not precise enough to tell which building, but definitely not on a glacier. Who is this? I typed, fingers tight on the keyboard. This account is for safety communications. You see a lot of people, came the reply. But nobody really sees you, do they? My skin crawled. I showed the messages to my manager, Mark. Older guy. Been flying up there since the 80s. He squinted at the screen. Probably some guide screwing around, he said. Or a pilot bored on weather hold. I'll send out a note to knock it off. He did, company-wide email. Only use InReach for official comms. I felt foolish for how rattled I'd been. Maybe it was one of our own after all. A week went by. No strange pings. Then, on a busy Saturday, the device chimed 3 times in 5 minutes. Red rain jacket looks good. Those tourists are annoying you. You should take a break. You've been on your feet 4 hours. The map location this time showed a point in the river just below town, like the sender was on a boat or the far bank. I stepped outside again, heart pounding. My red rain jacket glared against the gray sky. A raft full of fishermen floated by on the Talkeetna. One of them raised a hand in a casual wave. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or just the building. I messaged again. Identify yourself, or we will treat this as harassment and contact authorities. There was a pause this time. Then, don't do that. I'm not the danger you need to worry about. Then who is? No answer. I started changing small things. Swapped shifts with coworkers. Took breaks at odd times. Wore my hair up when the InReach was quiet, down when it pinged. Each time, the messages matched what I'd done, not anything I'd posted. Because that was the thing, like most of my generation, I posted. Photos of Denali at sunset. Boomerangs of planes taking off. Selfies with friends at the brewery. But I'd always been careful about timing. I posted after the fact, not live. My captions were vague. Long day, best view, office with a view. I never geotagged my exact location during a shift. Whoever was messaging me wasn't pulling details from social media. They were seeing me in real time. I went to the trooper's post in town, showed them screenshots, map points, device ID. Could be someone pranking you, the trooper said. Could be someone with a crush and poor boundaries. None of what you've shown me rises to a criminal threat yet, but we can document it. Keep logging everything. If it escalates, we'll have a trail. I walked out angry at how familiar that script sounded. Vary your routine. Stay aware. Wait for escalation. The escalation came at the end of August. Late season. Fewer tourists. More climbers and hunters. The light getting a little lower each evening. The mountain hiding more behind clouds. We had a guided glacier hike out that day, 3 clients, 1 guide, 1 in reach. Their device ID was tagged in our system. I could see them on the map, moving along the ridge. Pings every 10 minutes like clockwork. At 3:12 p.m., their dot and the anonymous device's dot overlapped. It took me a second to realize what I was seeing. The shared map showed 2 IDs at the exact same coordinates at the same time, then splitting again like 2 raindrops running down a window. I checked the message log. Nothing from our guide. 1 new ping from the anonymous device. Nice group you sent up, it said. Shame you never get to see where they really go. I grabbed the radio. Guide 3, this is base. Radio check. Static, then our guide's voice, faint but clear. Base, this is guide 3. Go ahead. Everything okay up there? I asked, weather holding. Bit of wind, but we're good, she replied. Clients are stoked. Why? I hesitated. I couldn't exactly say. Some creep's device is next to yours on the map. Just checking in, I said. Let us know if anything changes. I screenshot the map. Saved the ping. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the mouse. For the rest of their hike, the anonymous dot followed at a distance. Sometimes a 1/4 mile off, sometimes half, always there. Our guide never mentioned seeing anyone. When they got back and debriefed, I pulled her aside. Did you see any other parties out there? I asked. Any solo hikers within reach? She frowned. No, she said. We had the ridge to ourselves. Why? I showed her the screenshot. Her face went pale. Maybe it's off by a bit, she said weakly. GPS drift. Drift doesn't track you this closely for 4 hours, I said. Whoever that was, they were shadowing you. We went to mark together this time. 2 of us. Less easy to dismiss. He looked more rattled now. I know most of the independent guides around here, he said. Nobody I know would pull something like this. He emailed Garmin with the device ID, asking them to contact the registered owner about misuse. They replied that due to privacy policies, they couldn't disclose user information, but they would review the complaint. Nothing changed. The next day, the anonymous device started messaging when I was off shift. Cute dog, it said at 7:13 p.m. I was walking my roommate's husky mix down Main Street, off work. Hair in a messy bun, hoodie instead of company fleece. You working tomorrow? Another ping came at 9:05 p.m., right as I stepped out of the bar with friends. The map showed the device somewhere upriver again. The timing suggested otherwise. "You're not out there," I typed with shaking hands. "You're in town." No reply. Just that blinking icon. A ghost following all the other ghosts on the screen. I stopped walking to work alone. Started getting rides from coworkers. Stopped posting anything until days after it happened. I slept with my own inReach, one I'd bought for personal hikes, on my nightstand, like some kind of twisted mirror of what had started all this. The message that finally pushed things into enough territory came in September, right before fall shut down. Tourist season was effectively over. We were running freight and a few late hunters, mostly. The anonymous device had been quiet for a week. I'd almost convinced myself it was done. Then, on a slow afternoon, it pinged. "Blue flannel again. You really like that shirt." I was, in fact, wearing my favorite blue flannel. "This is harassment," I typed. "I've logged every message. Troopers have a copy. Stop." "I'm just watching out for you," came the reply. "You watch out for everyone else. Someone should return the favor. Who are you?" 3 dots. Then, "Someone who's better at this game than your ex was." My blood ran cold. 6 months earlier, I'd broken up with a boyfriend who'd gotten too comfortable reading my texts over my shoulder and jokingly tracking my location on Snapchat. I hadn't told many people the details. My closest friends, one coworker, no one in management, certainly no one I'd expect to have a Garmin account. The phrase "better at this game" was something my ex had said once when I'd caught him lying about where he'd been. I could still hear his voice, the smugness, the way he'd made it sound like we were on the same team instead of on opposite sides. I realized then that whoever was on the other end of that device had more than just my visual habits. They had context, phrases, pieces of my past they shouldn't have. That night, I drove to Anchorage on my days off and met with a cybercrimes detective my friend's cousin knew. I brought printouts, screenshots, a notebook full of dates and times. He took it seriously in a way the trooper in Talkeetna hadn't had the bandwidth to. "This kind of thing is getting more common," he said. "Tech makes it easy to blur lines between watching and stalking." He filed a report, subpoenaed Garmin for user data, coordinated with local troopers. It took months, but eventually they got a name. It wasn't my ex. It was someone who made my stomach flip in a different way. One of our seasonal mechanics. Quiet, polite, always in the background. The one who installed and maintained our inReach mounts. The one who knew my schedule because he updated the whiteboard with me every morning. The one who'd helped my ex install a roof rack on his truck once as a favor. When troopers showed up at his cabin with a warrant, they found the device, plus logs of every message he'd sent. They also found printouts of my social media posts, a notebook where he'd written down my shifts, my clothing, what time I usually took lunch. He never said a creepy word to me to my face. He ended up with a stalking charge, conditions not to contact me, to stay away from the company, to surrender his devices. Small comfort, enough to let me sleep with my windows open again. A little. I moved to Anchorage the next spring. Got a new job nowhere near flight seeing. I kept my personal in reach, though. I still use it when I hike. But now, I triple check which accounts it's paired to. Who has access to the map? Who can see my little blinking dot? We think of stalking as someone following behind us on a dark street, footsteps echoing on concrete. We don't think as much about the quiet guys in offices and hangars and maintenance shops, the ones who put the devices in our hands and build the systems we trust, the ones who can sit in a cabin 15 miles upriver, watching our dots move around town and convincing themselves it's just watching out. If you have a job that uses location tech, rideshare, guiding, delivery, aviation, treat that data like the key to your front door. Ask who can see it. Ask how long it's stored. Ask what happens if someone on the inside decides to make it personal. Because sometimes the person who scares you most is the one who never has to leave the office to be everywhere you go. We've covered dispatch centers, bush plains, haul roads, lodges, canneries, ferries, and flight seeing. All different jobs. All the same thread. People who mistook someone else's work and life for their playground. Outrow. That's it. 7 stories from 7 corners of Alaska. Anchorage, the YK Delta, the Dalton, Denali country, Bristol Bay, the Inside Passage, Talkeetna. The thing about Alaska is people talk about the landscape like it's the scary part, the moose, the bears, the avalanches, the whiteouts. And yeah, all of that can kill you if you're careless. But if you listened closely, none of these stories were really about the weather, or the darkness, or the miles between towns. They were about people who used that isolation. People who learned schedules and camera angles and satellite tracks. People who took advantage of places where backup was 30 minutes, 3 hours, or 3 months away. If any of this sounded familiar, you're not alone. A lot of us ignored our gut feeling because we didn't want to seem paranoid or ungrateful or not tough enough for the job or the road or the state. A lot of us wish we hadn't. If you're in the middle of something like this right now, whether it's on a boat, in a small town clinic, in a dispatch center, on a remote road, or in a tourist town, document everything. Tell people you trust. Call it what it is. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for it to get worse. Your safety matters more than being polite, more than the paycheck, more than what anyone will think about you for leaving. If these stories kept you listening, hit like and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're from. And yeah, what time you're watching. It really does help the algorithm find people who need to hear this. Maybe someone sitting 1,000 miles away on their own version of a graveyard shift hears your comment and realizes they're not imagining it. Trust your gut. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in the next one.